Recording in the cloud. So we have that video as well. All right, you guys. Well, happy Saturday and welcome to the Regenerative Neighborhood Framework calls. This is call 6 of the Saturday variant, which is where we explore one of the 5 topics. Let's see, Eric is here now. Hello, Eric. Welcome. And Kevin is here as well. Perfect. Welcome, Kevin. Welcome, Eric. We were just kicking off the intro. Welcome, you guys. Happy Saturday. So this is call 6 of the Regenerative Neighborhood Framework calls. It's our second call on the topic of hardware. So everything in the built environment. We're going to be taking a little bit of a check-in following the activity we did last week on the topic of values. I had a great call with Kevin earlier in the week where we explored the importance of having clearly defined values and going about it in a certain way. Starting with like our non-negotiables, the things that we need for survival as humans. Kevin, I'd love if you want to share a little bit of your kind of perspective. I've made a spot on the board for it. I think everyone here is a familiar face. I'd love to do a little breakout group session before we kick off where everyone gets to know each other. Maybe I'd love to, as a, precursor to that, share this idea about values, and maybe we can discuss that a little bit in the breakout group that we're in before we all come back together and jump in the board. Let's see, Vic is here. Vic also shared some awesome exercises for the practices of finding values in a group. He shared some great exercises with me. Welcome, Vic. Good to see you.
Oscar, yeah, I would be happy to speak for a moment. Yeah, because then obviously this is something that we all participate in. But the basic idea that I talked to Oscar about in terms of, and it goes to the framework for a regenerative community, right? Is the importance of establishing a set of virtues that define like organizing principles that define a regenerative community that would resonate with anyone who would be a member of that community, right? And so that is a part of us setting up the framework. But here's the challenge of our human experience is that our history has taught us that we are good at setting up constructs. The question is whether the construct we set up actually is reality, or is this just a human construct that we've constructed that then turns out to be very, very bad once you try to apply it over time, right? And so to not have us just replicate another construct that doesn't align with nature, that doesn't align with humanity, okay, let us tether this effort to build defining virtues for a regenerative community, right, on the undeniable aspects that we can all reach to, and that is how we survive each day as humans. It becomes the undeniable connection that all of us can reference. Like we have to have air, right? Okay, so there is wisdom in our survival that tells us what it is to be human. That needs to be a tethering, a limiting framework for how do you want to set up values for a regenerative community. Okay, and so this is the suggestion I'd made to Oscar that the problem with these things that are self-evident is that we take them for granted, and we do them on autopilot. We just breathe, our heart just beats. But the problem with autopilot is it's outside of the range of our conscious consideration. Well, if we bring them in the range of our conscious consideration, we discover certain truths that are essential to being human, right? That literally modern society has forgotten because we take those things for granted. So this is the point of the exercise, is to bring us in on something that all of us, because of our lived experience and because we're all humans, it's a shared experience. It's a shared reality. We will all be able to resonate with wisdom that's steeped out of that. And so that was a starting point. We'll build on it, but it was as a starting point. So that was the idea.
So thank you for elaborating a bit, Kev. So for the three that just joined, Theodora, Rick, and Hannah, welcome you guys. Happy Saturday. Thank you for being here. This is call 6, where we're going to be exploring topics of hardware, the built environment, the things we build as humans in our regenerative neighborhoods to make them thrive. Right before we do that, we're going to introduce a follow-up to last week's question, where we started outlining values and the resulting principles of those values. And so Kevin shared a perspective on how we can approach it to find common denominators of values based on the things that we need as humans: fresh air to breathe, water to drink, food to eat, shelter. And yes, this is being recorded for Hannah that you just asked. There's a few audio recorders. We're recording the video, and we'll be sharing this on YouTube after the call a couple days later. But right before we go into breakout groups, so everyone can check in with each other and have a little more human connection, I want you to have this question in mind of values. One of the values we aligned on this call is that we're building connection between the community members that are joining. So we're going to go into breakout groups. After the breakout groups, we're going to jump into an activity where we're going to go through Maslow's hierarchy, starting from core needs, working our way up to higher needs. And we're going to be defining some of our non-negotiables, values that will hopefully help us map out values away from just the theoretical, be kind and be conscious, but more based on our needs. So we're going to go into breakout groups. There's what, 3, 6, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 of us. I'm going to do 4 breakout groups. I think that should be good. About 3 people.
For breakout groups?
And so
most of us know each other already.
Yeah, so most of us know each other. Usually we do a small check-in of like where we're checking in from, what we're excited about this call. And this week, I'd love to add 2 new questions. I'd invite each of you to share what is something you're celebrating this week, and also what is something you're being challenged by this week, to get us in a very open, more, vulnerable, sharing, celebratory mood as we move into the next phase of exploring our values together. So I'm going to set up 4 breakout groups. If there's only bots in your group, which shouldn't happen, I believe I'll see. Okay, let me go here.
Leo?
Oh, yeah, we have one more. Leo, perfect. Okay, hello, Leo. Welcome. We're about to go into breakout groups. And the prompt for the breakout groups is to share where you're joining in from, what are you excited about for this call, and something you're celebrating this week and something you were challenged by this week. Okay, and here we go, you guys. It's going to be about a 5 to 7 minute breakout group. I'll check in on the groups and see how it's going. All right, so they're all created. So
Hello, note takers. Apparently, everybody's in breakout rooms. That's fun.
Hey, Kamara.
Hi.
We need to catch
Brad,
up.
hi.
We need
Nice to see you, man.
No, I don't get on these calls.
Okay, hello everybody. Welcome. We're back in the group, and there's many more of us. A few
Rick.
joined last minutes. Vincent, welcome. Kamara, welcome. We're all back. Hey, Brad, nice to see you. A bunch of regenerative friends in here, and familiar faces now from the 6 weeks of calls that we've been hosting. Just to check in for the new entries. Today is hardware, and we are actually going to be taking a little bit of a pause on getting right into gathering resources, and we're going to explore the topic of values. We did a little opener last week where we did about a 15-minute exercise on gathering values, focused on hardware. This week, we're going to broaden out a little bit, and we're going to focus on gathering a list of values based on the individual, and a little exercise guided by Kevin, starting with our non-negotiables, focusing on what we actually need for survival. Maybe am I describing that in a succinct way, Kevin?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay,
absolutely.
So I think Sonia, can you share a link to the Miro board? I'm going to share the Miro board where we're going to be hosting this exercise. Now that we've all come back, so here is the Miro board. I'm sharing my screen for anyone that doesn't want to go on the Miro board and wants to just follow along. Also for the recording, anyone that's going to be watching this YouTube video in the next couple of days. Again, this is a call series where we are connecting with the goal of creating a framework for building a regenerative neighborhood. Designing it, building it, and operating it. We've broken the process into 5 main categories. One was ecology. We did that 2 weeks ago. These 2 weeks, we're doing hardware, everything in the built environment. These are the subcategories that comprise this macro category: master planning, housing systems, building, water solutions, food solutions, energy, air, and waste solutions, and then manufacturing and transport. So all of the subcategories in the hardware section. Every week, we're doing 2 calls, one for exploring this category and subcategories in a theoretical way, asking questions, sharing stories. And the second call is more focusing on the specific resources that each of us have or have come across on our journeys of regenerative neighborhoods. Projects we know of that have awesome housing solutions, or startups that we know that are providing amazing energy solutions or waste solutions, things that we're integrating into our own communities in terms of food production or building solutions. So later on this call, we're going to go section by section, and we're going to have a minute or two for each of you to go into your bookmarks, phone books, and Google searches and add resources to the specific categories. That space is over here. We'll get there in maybe halfway through the call. Each one of these subcategories, you'll be invited to share a link for a startup that you know of, or the name of a community that you know of somewhere in the world that is doing an exemplary job of showcasing any of these specific solutions. Let me get one of these stickies, and I want to put some on each one of these. Let's put one here. Let's put one here. Here. So you'll be able to take Post-its, these Post-its that I'm attaching here, and drag them into the corresponding box and add your links. Before we get into that, we have by, popular demand, have explored the critical step in the journey of aligning on values. Of course, we're discussing the term regenerative and what that means. So regeneration has its own set of values that we're going to explore in a next question, actually. In this first question, we want to focus on values that you need to live, right? Kevin shared and Vic also shared some wonderful ideas on how we can come up with exercises that guide each of us to identifying core values we each need. We broke it down into core needs and higher needs. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, Sonia, did you put that photo in here? No. If you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy, I'm going to share an image in a minute. Or Sonia, if you can drop that image that we have. I'm going to invite each of you. I'm going to set a timer for 2 minutes. And this timer is going to guide us through an exercise. Here, timer, 2 minutes. Think about your core needs, the things that you need for survival, right? Like I need to drink 4 liters of water a day. I need at least 2,000 calories of food or 1,000 minimum per day to survive. I'm going to invite each of you to share things that you need in that core needs section. If your mind gets full of core needs, feel free to jump into higher needs. We're going to go through Maslow's hierarchy pyramid in a second, but start with core needs. What do you need to survive in a daily, your daily routine? And this will become the beginning of how we define the values in future questions. So start with this. We have 1 minute, 45 seconds. Yeah. Start sharing the things that you find are your no. I didn't put music on the timer. Week. Okay, 53 seconds, you guys. Coordinates. Okay, 20 seconds. Right, great. So we've now listed our core needs, things that we need to survive. And Kevin, I'd love your support on this one, as this was, coming from your direction on how we can kick this off. My thought was to next explore some of the higher needs that individuals have. I'm sharing an image up here of the breakdown of Maslow's hierarchy. There's been a little bit of an upgrade to it from what I've seen in recent models, where they've separated one of the top categories, which here I'll share the original image I was familiar with in the past. And they've broken down one of the top ones of like esteem and love and belonging. They've broken that one into 2 separate things, which is like aesthetic needs. They've added transcendence at the top, and they've broken another one down into cognitive needs. And so this is interesting. I think a little bit of a better breakdown. Kevin, what would be your thought for the next step in this journey of like, now we've listed our core needs. Can you share some of yours and how they fit into this puzzle?
Yeah, well, certainly human needs are, we can spend hours itemizing the things we actually need to exist. I mean, it's an extensive list, but from a conceptual perspective, if we could acknowledge something that we don't often think about, right, which is that as humans, we don't produce and cannot produce the things we need to exist. So therefore, our existence is a function of the relationship we have with other life on Earth, including the critters in our stomach, right, in our gut, right, and the natural environment that sustains us. The significance of that is the idea that all those things are essential for us to exist, right, notwithstanding the itemized list, moves us towards this notion of why shared interests or the commons or valuing the common interests is essential. It's not a normative thing. It's not a nice thing. We don't exist otherwise, which calls into question this notion of how do you organize a country on independence when none of us or nothing in nature lives independently, right? So that's the first core need that I am identifying at the highest level, because we could get into the minutia of all the individual. There's so many minerals I need to survive. That's not the point. The point is I don't produce most of them. The point is that for example, just the food we eat. Well, I mean, we need fertile soil, millions of years of critters, right? Okay, decompose. My point being is none of us can do this. None of this is designed to work in isolation. And as a result, if we recognize that we exist within the context of a symbiotic relationship, right, then the values that come thereafter, tethered to that, lend itself to regenerative communities, right? This is how sustaining ecologies are organized, because they understand that, the super predator doesn't kill all the prey.
So it seems that by outlining these needs, your goal, right? I can work backwards from it. Is okay. My goal is to identify that interdependence is one of the values that's critical for a community.
Well, it's essential. It is the truth. Again, it's not a philosophical ideal. It's simply how we exist. And so once you start from that, and it's an undeniable way that we exist, it's something that everyone can buy in based on their actual lived experience. Right? Sure. You don't have to convince someone how they exist when they don't produce the food they eat, right? And can't, And so that's what I mean. So it gives us a tethering that's universal amongst us to start,
Right. So I think this exercise, again, to me, the outcome of this exercise is realizing how many things we depend on to live, both as core needs, and I'm seeing everyone's blowing up the higher needs. Beautiful. Good job. So one of the resulting values from all of these things that we need is interdependence, not just on each other as humans, but also on the environment.
But then it could lead to another value, which is that, in a regenerative community, and I'm just throwing it out there, and I want to, obviously everyone's going to participate. Sure. Each of us should have an equal claim, and I don't mean equal outcome, but equal claim to the resources we need to survive, those resources being resources that sustain all of us. In other words, no one should have a greater claim to the resources we need to survive, right? Like I said, I don't mean in how much resource we use, because everyone's needs are different. But that you have a claim to the resources you need to survive. You need to sustain yourself, need to grow and reach your full potential, that kind of thing, right? Right.
Yeah.
And that would come from the idea that, well, because you exist in this interdependent way, right? So therefore, all of us have a right to have the resources we need to survive, and should not be able to claim enough resources that denies the next person the resources they need to survive.
Go ahead and put that value on the bottom, equal claim to resources. I'm going to invite everyone to now look at the box beneath, which is what are resulting values. Now that we have in mind what are needs that we have, both core needs and higher needs, I think an interesting exercise is maybe go from one of your needs and map that to values, whether that is a value that speaks to you or a value that you can broaden to the whole collective. As an example, right, we saw that all of these things prove that there's a value of interdependence. All of us sharing that we need food and shelter and water. All this kind of connects with the point you were just making, Kevin, that we should have equal claim to the resources we need. right? Even if we use different amounts of it, that's fine. But we all have this equal claim concept that you're sharing. And then I think the last piece of this will be, what are some of the regenerative values? So we'll keep that at the end. Try to separate these, because of course there's like values that we see because we've seen on a textbook, like being like kindness or reciprocity. And like, I think, Kevin, you brought up a good point where there's like, or I think Vic was saying this, that there's like, we put on our left brain or our right brain, and one of our brains is like the textbook. We've learned this and we know that should be the value to be a decent human. And then there's the other side of it, which is what we're doing first, which is by identifying our needs, we can work through values to ensure that those needs are met, not just for ourselves, but for the entire collective. So I think we're on that one right now, which is the resulting values from our needs. Our needs, great.
Mm.
All right, we'll leave it one more minute, you guys. Upload anything you want, then we'll have a little discussion on how these math values beneath that I've put that are the regenerative values just from synthesis of a bunch of resources. Okay, cool. All right, so what are resulting values from our needs? Let's see. Does anyone have anyone that they want to share specifically that they're very strong and passionate about, and is like they realize, wow, this was very important for me to identify?
I have something.
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Dr. Brian.
I think there is a need for a safety net when it comes to core needs, and that is, food, water, energy, shared abundance there. But then beyond that, I think there's a fundamental question of equality or equity. And I think that's probably a deep conversation that really helps. Humanity's been struggling with for a couple of centuries, if not millennia. But I think finding a balance there would be really good. And I would seek to develop a shared vision, mission, and aims, even for Masterminding Eden, that represents consent, if not consensus.
Quality and equity, yeah. Okay. What did you want to create for Masterminding Eden? This
vision, mission, and aims.
Vision, mission, aims for the entire organization.
Well, I think for the general circle, yes, because that provides a guide star around which the circle can, in fact, develop informed perspectives, if you will. And I think it really helps to clarify. And, you can dive into governance, and we will later on later calls. But I think these are some examples that have come up, with the Post-its that we have here.
Okay. Okay, nice. Yeah. I imagine Chimera has a decent write-up to that. We can maybe explore that a little bit later. If you have it somewhere handy, Chimera, maybe you can like drop it in here somewhere. I think in my understanding, the process comes from like people sharing what they hold close to them, their personal values, principles, whatever that may be. And then from there, we're also going to be creating a container, right? I think we talked about this last week on the call a little bit about how the container, does the container define the individuals that join it, or do the individuals and their specifications define the container? And I understand it to be some mix of both. The individuals shape the container, and the container shapes who actually steps into this container. And so with that in mind, I would like, I guess, everyone's maybe check in on this. To the left of, my next question is generally like, what are the regenerative values? What are the values for a regenerative neighborhood? That if the people that step into this place to live, what are the things that we need them to agree to, so that we feel comfortable that we're all on the same page with this community that we're building, right? Again, with, let's say, the vision, mission, purpose of this specific gathering and series of calls is to identify what makes a regenerative neighborhood and create a tool that guides the process of planning one, designing one, building one, and operating one. So to the left, I've shared a list of, I've been gathering lists of different values and principles that people have been sharing, from different books to PDFs to all kinds of stuff. And this has been the most synthesized list, organized by categories. I'd love for you guys to like check it out on the side. Welcome. Someone new just arrived to the call. Welcome, welcome. We're on the Miro board. The link is in the chat. Let me know if you need it. We're going through values right now quickly before we jump into the nitty gritty of gathering some resources on the call. So as you guys are looking through this list of regenerative movement values, potentially the exercise could be that we start taking cards and putting them in the right sections, aligning them on the left with these. That could be interesting. Or maybe if you see one that you didn't know of before, I would love for you to go ahead and take at least one or two and put them into this box on the bottom of what are the regenerative values that you connect with. Most with, maybe that's a good one. And that's a good way. Again, at the end of this journey, the reason we're picking individuals' minds is because we all have a unique lens from lived experiences, from history that we've, gone through in the past, and broadening the scope to everyone's, as many participants' perspectives as possible, will give us a lot of data that we are now on Thursdays hosting a call where we are processing all of this data that we're gathering on these calls through LLMs. We are using different AI services to take in these images and all of this content, synthesize it in some way, and apply it to a guide that has been formed. I'd love to share that with you guys. I'm going to share a link to that. It's on the website, where in the first week on those AI processing calls, Dr. Brian did a great high-level summary of all of the slides that we have on this Miro board. Last week, we did a more in-depth breakdown of the first 3 calls, where we described the why, how, what of the framework. And we've massaged the data to give us a first version framework tool. I'll share a link here for it so you guys can check it out. I'll share it in a bit as well. But all of that starts with, actually, I'm going to share that screen right now. Let me share this tab instead. Oh no, it's how to use this model, sequence model complete. Maybe it's this one. Worksheet, hybrid sequencing model, this one. Okay, cool. Yeah, it's this one. Okay, so this is the first pass at, I'm going to share here as well for you guys so everyone has it. Copy link. It's here on the board. I'm going to put it just right here. Okay, so this is the first pass that the LLM has given us of how it, in its, high level knowledge of both the resources we've been giving it and other things on the internet, it's guided us through this framework sequence, right? A framework being why we're doing this, how we're doing it, and a process to implement these rules. So it goes through 5 different spirals. One of proof of concept, then feasibility, then capital focus, then construction operations, and continuous regeneration. In the first section, proof of concept, I just want to share to show that we're doing a lot of this already in our very intuitive way that we organize ourselves, where we've assembled a core team, more or less, the regulars that are joining these calls and the new participants that are joining every week and becoming part of this core team. We're getting to know each other through the kind of things that we do, where we are. This is when we do the breakout groups, some of the things that we've done in the past. Let's see. We're also sharing a vision. I think this is what you were just touching on, Dr. Brian, where at the highest level, Masterminding Eden and has a vision to design and gather people to help make designs. At a micro, our vision right now is to gather resources and build this framework so we can build more of these communities. So we've been doing a lot of these processes. And one of the important ones, governance, we haven't really discussed governance yet. We're going to leave that for the human systems calls next week and the week after. But one of the important ones that's on here is the values assessment, which very aligned even before that call. Well, hold on, my brain just totally slipped. Even before that call, Kevin suggested that we should touch up on the values again and review what are the values of this group and what are the values as we apply that to a physical location. And so this is kind of what we're working on right now. And I just wanted to share this sample. I've shared a link on the side. You guys feel free to go through this. I just wanted to give you a little peek at this document that, based on our desires, our requests, and what our goals are, the LLM has returned to us this very useful tool with checkpoints and gates of coherence to make sure that we're following a linear or as much of a linear process as possible to ensure we make designs correctly, plan correctly, and build correctly. All right, so I'm going back to the board. I see we've added some of the values that people connect with. I'd love any reflections on this value conversation, right? This alone could be multiple 3 to 5 hour workshops. I'm working on condensing it. I wanted to get a touch on this, at least 30 minutes of conversation before we go into next week's calls that are human systems, which we're going to go into the values topic once again in the human systems. By then, we should have a pretty comprehensive list of the values that this group holds important, aligned with the general regenerative values of this movement. And we can start putting that into this framework template that we've created. I think the ultimate test will be to test that framework. Dr. Brian, you have your hand up.
Oh, yeah. I just wanted to say, when it comes to regeneration, I think we're at a cusp and a very special time in history where, for the first time in 6,000 years, we can actually build regenerative community that moves beyond extraction. In other words, we build a core capability for energy, food, water, and abundance of labor. And then we don't, the stellar community actually doesn't need more inputs to keep producing the core needs of the community. And that moving beyond extraction fundamentally changes the way we interact with the rest of nature. So that's just one example of regenerative values.
Sure, the tools and the practices exist now for us to build not just self-sustaining, but again, regenerative, creating more resources so we can increase the bioavailability and the biomass of a specific location.
Right. And actually, perhaps one of the greatest aspirations of a stellar community would be to generate another stellar community, either nearby or another place on the planet, that and effectively endow that community to also achieve stellar abundance.
Yeah, Yeah, right. Seeding more of these locations.
And that by definition is regeneration. And that is the regeneration time for a community to regenerate itself or replicate itself.
Right. That's a full cycle, right? Just like biologically, full cycle is reproduction to continue the movement.
R greater than one, an exponential with a positive exponent, right?
Okay, cool. Yeah. Good point.
See, that's a wonderful conversation right there that you all just had about. And so if you take what Dr. Brian said and take like one of the words like abundance and why this value conversation is so important is that the modern society's definition of abundance is about how much we have, how much we have right now. And if you have a lot, you are abundant. But that's not abundance in nature. Abundance is having what you need, always having what you need when you need it. And so this is why we define abundance in a way that requires accumulation. We encourage billionaires, right? Okay, but that creates scarcity. That's not how sustaining systems in nature work. And so sufficiency in the use of resources without it seeming like it's Spartan. In other words, use the resources you can use to achieve and sustain yourself to your full potential. But no more. In other words, there needs to be a limit to that's self-governing at the value level, right? Because this is the only way that the abundance is fully shared by everyone. In other words, there's never enough for everyone if some people take so much way beyond what they can actually use. Okay, so that's what I mean. So this notion of sufficiency and what abundance actually means, if we look to nature, it means using what you need and no more.
Right. Abundance is having what you need. Right, without having to hoard and have more, right? I think people do that expecting, a correction or a drought in the future at some point. So finding that balance between those two worlds is quite important. I agree. Okay, does anyone have any other points on the value topic that they'd like to share, something they just discovered before we jump into now more focused on the hardware? I'm seeding the group with this concept of values. It's really critical, like Kevin shared, and for a lot of first-time participants, wrapping their mind around designing a community and sharing what's important to them, being reminded of our values to kick off does help, like in schools where people pledge allegiance to whatever country or their flag, whatever it is. This is kind of a little bit in that sense to get us into the right mindset as we go into designing. Yep. Any feedback? Any comments anyone would like to share on values, topic of values? Yeah, go ahead, Alejandra.
Hi. Nice to meet you, everyone. Sorry, I'm a bit late. I think values, we know that there's a value crisis, and I think it's important to point out the role of marketing in this, because that's what incites people to overconsumption. Like, you need to be wearing the last trendy clothes, the most expensive car or phone or whatever. So as already David Attenborough said about biodiversity, it's a marketing problem. So we need to acknowledge that as well. To put out the regenerative values, we need to market them somehow. So people is really appreciating them.
Okay. Yeah, that's a good share. Thank you. Yeah. It is important to remind people the core of why we're gathering, why we're doing certain things. Yeah, I agree. Okay, beautiful. Yeah, thank you for sharing that. Rick, yeah, go ahead.
Hey there. Yeah. So thanks everybody. I'm pretty new to the group here and just really orientating myself on the fly. And I'm curious, when you all say regenerative, is there a shared purpose or North Star that's actually guiding the decisions in this group yet? Or is it something that you're discovering together? Because what I've learned in my experience is that pretty much the hard way is that values alone don't always guide decisions under pressure. And when it comes to regenerative, I usually think about teal concepts where there's really three components to it. It's self-management or self-organization, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose that leads the way. And I know that a lot of the work that I do, the first thing we do is we define that evolutionary purpose together first, and then all of this kind of comes from that. I'm kind of curious how that's flowing here with your group.
Okay. Yeah. Good question. Good question.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that, Rick.
Yeah, please, Vic, please.
Vic here. Yeah, I like what you said. I've been studying values for a long time. I think it will be important for us to differentiate the words we're using to describe something. So like values, a lot of us use values as principles. They're not really values. For example, needs are not values. They're different. So correlating, and some people's like, there's a famous guy I studied under, Dr. Fritjof Capra. He said there's no communication until you communicate about communication. It's like took me a year to figure that out. What the heck did he mean by that? But I think as a community, we have to go there because the language we use has been it's been brainwashed. So you know what I value? My Nikes. I value my Nikes. Well, that's not a value. That's coming from a belief system that someone gave to me and I didn't question. So using this kind of conversation, I don't know if anybody else would be interested, but I'd like to have that talk sometime. I'm in with that. Thanks.
Okay, nice. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that, Vic. Yeah. So, Rick, let's say, or does anyone else have a perspective? Because the beauty of this is we're recording these calls, and these recordings and the transcripts from these calls are also being uploaded to this LLM for processing. So this is like a mass endeavor, to test the abilities of these LLMs today to see how we can take all of our thoughts and blend them into something useful. So would anyone else like to share? Brian, go ahead.
Yeah, I think I'd like to just provide a reference to the book called Stellar by Tony Seba and James Arbib. And it's excellent at providing a vision for a post-extractionary community or communities that can be regenerative, that has a clear vision, perhaps mission and aims, and it is able to provide abundance at community scale, local, decentralized governance, and that abundance provides those core needs and kind of relates to the hardware that we were talking about. So that's at least one data point that I think can help to inform, in addition to the nice vision mission statement that's provided in Masterminding Eden to the right of our needs panels. Thanks. Our values panels.
Okay, let's see that. Yeah, does anyone else have what they understand are like common denominator? Rick, what was the specific thing you asked for? Like our
So essentially, when it comes to regenerative purpose definition statements, in Teal, it starts off with pretty much connecting with like a governing purpose statement. We call it the GPS, which is the North Star, right? So the first, it pretty much goes like this, and it usually is like a session or sessions to get to this one particular statement. And it goes something like this: we exist to help dream target member, whoever that is, because if we're trying to help everybody, we're helping nobody, right? We exist to help dream target member move from their known related pain point, whatever that may be, for that target member, to desired transformation, right? Which is related to that market. And this is what makes things regenerative already, because we're tying into a need that kept somebody up at 2:00 in the morning last night, right? By, and then the unique way that we're providing that solution so they can, and then regenerative purpose, so some sort of regenerative component to that. And so that's pretty much the guiding star. That's how we make governing purpose statements that lead the way, making sure that, and this is how we get founders to basically get away from that protective gateway of their values, and we bake it into that evolutionary purpose statement, which is just part of that teal, that teal paradigm: self-organizing, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose. So I was curious if you guys have that governing purpose statement, that North Star, because if you don't, I'd be more than happy. I'd be more than happy to be part of that.
Well, I think
sure.
we have
I think this is
go ahead. North Star. Kamara has posted an excellent vision, mission, and aims, I would say. on the right, which provides a baseline for refinement, certainly, and serves in many ways as a guiding North Star. And that's just to the right of some of our values panels today.
I see it. Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen so others on the recording can see this.
Yeah.
And for everyone else, I'm gonna bring you over to my screen. If you're on the Miro board, you're gonna zoom over to me, bring everyone to me. Boom, you're all here now. Welcome. So yeah, here's a mission document from Masterminding. And Kamara, would you like to give a high level of it? Kamara is founder of Masterminding Eden, and a lot of the people here have been following the journey for a while. Same with our collective. We've been following and excited to collaborate with her on these calls.
Thank you. So I'm not gonna read it because I can see you're all looking at it and you can read it for yourselves. But the basic vision is to create a regenerative civilization on Earth as quickly as possible. That's the whole point. It's the most important thing we can do. How do we do that? We need a network of climate resilient, self-sustaining, regenerative places where people live and work and play. How do we get a network of these places? Well, we need one to start, and there's already examples of villages and stuff around the world, but none of them are fully closed loop, self-sustaining, climate resilient villages. I don't think it exists yet. And then, so once we have that one model, that model can be adapted and used to replicate around the world to create this framework. And the way that I saw being able to achieve that was through simulation, gamification, and collaboration through cooperative ownership and membership. And so it's, but the values are all the ones we've mentioned here, really. But for the Masterminding Eden vision, with the goal in mind of achieving the first unit of descriptive design, which could then be simulated and built, is what the document is based on. So not necessarily for a community, but rather for the functional building of the foundation that can create many communities.
Sounds great.
Thanks.
Effectively, we're creating a type of DNA that enables all the needs of the community be met, and for builders to create new communities with the open source or protected open source knowledge pack that they can stand on the shoulders of giants.
Yes. A specific location. Okay, cool. So let's see, Rick, does that share? Yeah, and it's awesome to have new members join and ask questions like this. Does that help? This is how the values question kind of came up very clearly. You know, this was a big inspiration from Kalia, who joined our technical call on Thursdays, and we were just talking about LLMs, and we sounded like a bunch of tech bros. And the heart of it is really defining the values of designing this regenerative society. Both, right? Our mind is definitely on like, what are the things we need for that to exist in kind of an off-grid scenario? But this is also very useful for cities and in urban, suburban scapes where maybe they won't be food sovereign because they're growing their own food, but they'll understand that it's critical to build a local network of food producers, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
I was wondering if you wouldn't mind. I took that doc that you guys have. I ran it through one of my agents. I have some examples of what I think, some ideas of some draft ones that came direct from the document. Can I share it in the chat? Is that helpful?
Yeah, you can share it in the chat. Maybe you're saying you process this long thing Kamara put in. Maybe right to the right of it. Start a little text box and drop it in there, if that works.
You know, I'm not a Miro guy, but I'll give it a shot.
Oh, if you want, you can put it in the chat and I'll move it over to the board.
Thank you. All right, cool.
Yeah.
And Rick, I wanted to put an input. I've been trying to think over and muddle over an idea of a principle you're asking for, and I was thinking of a diverse public commons that fosters spontaneous organization in bioregional stewardship.
That's a good start. Yeah, I like that. I like it.
It's
Yeah.
succinct as I was thinking of.
Yeah, the interesting thing about purpose is that there's so many different types of purposes, you know. The ones that I just put in there, those would be like examples of like a governing purpose statement, which is pretty much the ask test, like, you know, does this change, or does this partnership, is it in line with the government purpose statement, this thing that comes alive and kind of helps us make the decisions. Not saying any of these are right, but I just wanted to kind of introduce, like, these are some of the examples of what I might see as like a GPS for a group like this if I were coming in from the outside, based on just what you provided. But I don't know how any of this reflects with you guys. We're just, you know, basing off of what you showed.
I
But
think it's
for
good to
me,
be specific, and it could be that we refine the vision, mission, and aims to reflect some of the specificity that you've listed in options A, B, and C.
I'll put that template up there too, if it'll help.
So I just pasted the text you shared in the chat. I just posted it here to the right of what Camara described in one sentence that I did in pink cards. Create a regenerative society as soon as possible. To get there, we need a model prototype. To get there, we're designing a framework that outlines this prototype. And then a step in execution of that is, first we got to make that framework, which is what these calls are about, gathering resources, and then using an LLM to massage all of that data as usefully as possible so that everyone's ideas can be expressed in this, consulting agent type of product. And then from that, using that framework to actually create a blueprint for a specific or multiple locations. Ideally, we've even discussed now, the beautiful end result that could come of this is not just one land project, but what's the word we like? Federation, a federation, an alliance of land projects that are based on these defining values and framework, so that the individuals that want to support one are very comfortable in supporting various projects through time or through money or through expertise, to create a somewhat fund of projects that all have this common denominator, which is this value set, these principles. And this is what we're working towards defining very clearly.
So,
cool.
So Oscar, can we agree though, on a principle, that the idea that that a regenerative community, right, is aligning with sustaining ecologies? In other words, they're the model. This is like a form of biomimicry. How do sustaining ecologies function, right? And that a regenerative community would function in alignment with that. Otherwise, we're creating a construct that doesn't necessarily sustain, because we don't know we haven't done it before, right?
Sure. And so, I venture to take this even one step further. I've spent some time with some really awesome agroforestry people. And what they said is, sustainable is not actually what nature does. Nature doesn't stay the same. It doesn't just keep the status quo. The goal of a forest over time is to increase, and these were the words they used that have never left my mind, is to increase biomass and increase bioavailability of calories to increase biomass in a region. So over time, right, the idea of, a lot of, when I started with agroforestry and learning permaculture, I had such a hard time seeing a beautiful tree and cutting a tree down. And what nature does is, over time, that tree, if you define it correctly as a pioneer species, its job was to break up the rocks, open up the soil, to allow a bird that eventually can come by and drop a seed for a mango plant to come in and make some fruiting trees in the future.
No, I hear you, Oscar, but that's not what sustaining is. Sustaining doesn't mean never change. And that's what sustaining means you continue to exist. Of course, everything is changing. Everything is in motion. What I'm talking about, sustaining ecologies, absolutely, the life forms within that ecology have changed over time, but the ecology persists. Yes, it's adaptive, it's adjusting. Okay, what I'm saying is a regenerative community, which is going to be dynamic, just like everything else in nature, right? If we lean a model for how that works, we have ecologies that have been around for thousands and thousands and thousands of years, right?
Yeah.
Okay, this is Otherwise, we're creating, yes, humanity can create all types of constructs, right? But we didn't create reality. We didn't create the nature, right? If we want to see how it's actually done, this is what we tether it to. Otherwise, we're just doing another form of capitalism, another form of mercantilism.
Totally. Yeah, I think because, right, I think this is why we led with the ecology calls, because we accept maybe this is one of our values, or I think I mixed the words values, principles, and another word that someone just shared, that this is this instead of that. What did you say? Kalia. Yeah, you said it's a phenomenon, that we look at nature as the ultimate guide, and we aim to model our designs, infrastructure, systems as much as we can after nature, because that is tried and true and continues to thrive in all situations. Okay, so with that, I realized I'm doing a time check. It's 4:11 already. That gives us 20 minutes, you guys. So it's kind of going to be a blitz, this next series of exercises. We've explored values, and we're going to continue doing values. Next week, Saturday, we get into human systems, where we're going to now really focus on creating a agreed upon list of values based on this mission visions that Kamara shared, which I deeply agree with, and which is what we deeply align with. Okay, so one of the questions we wanted to lead was, what success stories for holistic hardware implementations do you know of? As in, do you know of any awesome land projects or any specific scenarios, even someone's home or something you know of or you have experienced, where they really did a great job of implementing something hardware focused? I'm going to drop this one down to only 2 minutes. I'm going to give us 2 minutes to share. If you have any that you've been to a land project, a community space, somewhere that is using something in the built environment that is very impressive to you, could you please drop the links to those projects here? We had a little more time for telling stories, but I think we're gonna save that till the very end. I'm putting 2 minutes on the timer.
Not sharing screen, so when you say here, it's not really well defined.
Thank you for telling me that. Okay. If you move to the right a little bit, I'm sharing my screen now. To the right of the values, we have this little box here where it's success stories of holistic hardware. If you know of any projects, maybe describe what you saw and put a link for that project. If they have a website or an Instagram or a wiki or anything that we can reference, that would be really useful.
Could you turn off the music, please, Oscar? It's a little intense right now.
Yes, it's off. There's an intense song. That was the one from last time.
Very upbeat elevator music.
Yeah.
Kind of frantic jazz.
Still on.
What was the best food for us I've ever seen?
I'm feeling like this is very broad, and I'm curious where we have room for specificity. Like if I wanted to drop some new solar panel technology, you really think this is the best spot to do that?
Well, this was just to here's a place and I saw this random thing that I really liked. If you keep scrolling to the right, I'm sharing my screen. Here are the specifics for each one of the categories and subcategories. Okay. Our ultimate goal here, you guys, today is that we get at least one new link for each of these subcategories: master planning, housing solutions, water solutions, food, energy, air, waste solutions, manufacturing, and transport.
This one is specifically for the solutions that you saw already implemented and tested, right? Because we all know a lot of resources and they're probably going to be amazing. And we also want to have a real life implementation of these solutions already existing, ideally in an eco-village neighborhood project, but it could be in a company or in your family home or whatnot.
Yeah, thank you for elaborating that. Right. There's there's a difference between knowledge and wisdom. You can know something, I can know that this company promotes this ultimate recycling solution, but until I've seen that thing actually working somewhere, I would call that wisdom, because I've seen it, I've touched it, I've installed it, or I've seen it in action. So I think the first question is more like the wisdom question, like where have you seen things actually working in an environment?
Another thing to that is that most of these hardware solutions in a land project will be somewhat connected to each other. So if we can find examples, then we're probably going to find this connection and these circular systems. So yeah, it's more, I visited Tamara and they have a really great water collection system. Or I visited TDF and they have this great, tree plantation site. This is really working, or, whatever that is. And again, it could be your family home, it could be your garden, it could be a company or a city where you saw a hardware solution that actually works.
Okay. All right, so let me see the screen here. Right. So now the time for sharing in this blue box, we have like 14 minutes left. So I'm trying to make the most of these last couple of minutes that we have together. Again, one of the biggest goals that we have for this framework and these calls are that everyone that's here, I imagine, has either seen something that caught their interest, or you've actually been to a place, or even in the best case, installed a system or worked with a system. And our goal is to gather that knowledge from everybody, both anecdotally, where you describe and share, and also very tangibly, where you share links with us and descriptions of these solutions. So I want to invite you guys over to the screen on the right of this, which breaks down, like Kamara just said, oh, I have this energy solution I would love to share. And I see that you're already adding a bunch of energy solutions into the energy column. And this is going to be the most useful for us, because we will be processing all of these links and all of this, let's say, knowledge that exists out there through the LLM in later steps. So I'm going to invite all of you guys as you drop things in there. Cool. I'd love to look through them. I'll leave the last 5 minutes of the call if anyone wants to elaborate a little bit on some of the projects you've seen. I see Village Home, Davis, California. That's awesome.
I am not able to access the Miro board right now. I'm having a hard time.
Okay.
But I do have a list that I want to add in there. Maybe I can add it at another time, or
Eric,
put it in the chat.
Eric, maybe you can go straight to the Tribes platform if that's easy for you, and go to each one of the groups. And in there, it's just like a forum. Feel free on the homepage to drop in a description and a link. And we're going to be pulling content out of there as one of the core repositories of data.
Okay, out of the Tribes platform.
Yeah. Like go to each one of the groups. Like if you have a good example of master planning organizations, or a good master plan that you have saved in your hard drive, drop it in the master planning group, and so forth and so on for the other groups.
It's mostly just links to a bunch of different applications of technology.
Okay. Interesting. Well, there's a technology group in like the software technology.
Well, I guess like a hardware. I was gonna just share it in the chat, but I mean I can. I would like to actually just put it into the document. I just have to do it. I probably can't do it while I'm on Zoom.
Yeah. It's probably hard on your phone, or the Miro's getting hefty, so it takes up a lot of memory, I realize.
If you put it in the chat in the Zoom, I think that should work as well. Then someone can put it in the Miro.
Yeah.
Most of it's text, so it shouldn't be that big.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so as we're going through this, let's see. Okay, everyone's like busy being there adding resources. Yeah, so I invite you guys, if you know of any projects, right, in the master planning thing, like as an example, we have a whole drive that I'm going to share my screen real quick. I invite you guys to continue. For the next 7 minutes or 6 minutes, imagine giving yourself 1 minute for each of these categories, or maybe you want to spend more on any of the categories. drop links to projects that you know of, maybe solutions providers that you know are great agroforestry people. Like let's put Phoenix Farms in there for permaculture. They're Mexican based. For waste management, we have a friend that's promoting a solution that takes all organic waste and even plastic and turns it into fertilizer and fuel. So we're going to drop that in there. I'm going to give a little just showcase here of, for any of you that are first time on the call, this Miro board, if you click on the groups, it is a link to the Tribes platform, which is a networking platform that we launched about 2 years ago. And it holds a group and forum and a document section so that you can post content for each one of these categories. I'm just going to explore the master planning one real quick to show you guys what we have in there. That's one of my favorite ones. Here we go, master planning. I'm sharing my screen if you're interested. And so each group has like a feed that shares updates of things people are sharing, resources, solutions, different kinds of conversations. In the discussions, it's like a forum, you know, traditional forum. People can ask a question and have sub talks about it. And then in documents, if you have PDFs or images or things you want to upload, we have example master plans from communities around the world, right? Like this one is this project called Project Camp. It's actually really cute. Save image. Let me save this one.
May I make an observation?
Like here, master planning. I'm going to share this down here.
Oscar?
Yeah.
I find that for myself, and I'm not sure if this is true for anyone else, but it is for me, that when somebody asks me to do a task and then they continue talking, it's almost impossible for me to continue focus unless I shut off the sound.
Got it. Okay, so I'm not going to talk for the next couple of minutes. I'm just going to share some links. Thank you for that reminder. I get anxious when it's like, I feel there's things I can answer. Thank you.
Creating a role always serves value.
All right, so I set a 1 minute timer. Let's wrap up whatever you guys can. While we're chatting, you will be able to keep adding cards, but let's give it another minute.
And we can add on to this later.
Sure. Right. And everyone, like the board stays alive even after the call. It's so valuable for us to get, it's like we've all done a ton of research and have explored the internet, and the collective knowledge of the individuals on this call, even if it's just one or two links, is I find to be one of the most valuable exercises of this experience.
Well, I shared a good collection in the chat, so I'll
Okay,
try
sure.
to upload all the links that I've been gathering over the last like 2 years. And
Cool.
Hey, Eric, I went ahead and put those links on the mirror board
oh, thank you.
with your name on it. So don't worry. I didn't take credit.
Okay, that's helpful because it took me a while. I was like doing a bit of procrastination last minute to like gather these, but um a lot of them are actual like even the
But they're
concepts
intense.
of
They're great, man. I mean, I was looking at
yes, I'm trying to map them all into one. I think the person that said something that I really appreciated was Simon Michel, and he was saying he was attempting the idea of industrial permaculture. And I like that idea. How to grade our production. How can we get our production and habitation to be like a technological organism? How do we take control of the matrix? We got to live with the matrix. They had that last movie. We made peace with the machines. So at this junction, how do we live symbiotically, not so confrontationally?
yeah. Well,
Um,
there's about 4 post-it notes there. Your content, and it's amazing. It's great stuff.
Thank you. Yeah, one of the things I sent you and Brian and Vic, the data-driven regeneration with Jonathan Ludgren, and he talks to John Kemp, and it's about agroecology and watching the entropic flows in nature and adjusting with that living system. And they go into like details of quantum physics. And the bioregional conversation with David Hankey, that really goes into depth about a lot of really in-depth understanding. So they're both very parallel to each other. And I know there was a video that I wanted to make sure Thomas Porter got to see, but it's a very well done um,
What
vegetable
email?
oil biodiesel
What email did
conversion.
you send that under? I'm looking for your email.
Oh no,
Or how did you send it?
no, it was Thomas. I meant
Yeah,
the Yanmar engine. It's in one of the links. The Yanmar 15 kilowatt genset conversion to run off of vegetable oil is one of the links, and
I'd like to see us move beyond combustion if we can.
I was just gonna say the only time combustion is okay is if you are capturing the emissions at the source of combustion and then feeding them into another cycle that is non-toxic, like algae production, etc. But there's still things like benzenes and other volatile organic compounds that are carcinogenic.
Yeah,
But
we
yeah,
can
it's
get
what we have
past that
now.
combustion. Yep.
I think in terms of transition from one culture to the next, because I feel like there's a lot of people that are going to refuse to move away from their diesel equipment. So if you don't provide a reasonable alternative, it's like you have to find a good common ground between those two. I mean, the vegetable oil idea is less sulfur, and can you grow your crop and keep it in a homeostatic balance? And then the idea of splicing vegetable oils with terpene profiles to change that BVOC and VOC content, like could we Could we turn our combustion into the production of rain clouds? Can we make a biotic pump with our logistics and our transportation?
Yeah, I
I
mean,
mean,
it's
that's
true.
very
They're using
hypothetical, but
vegetable oil on the Western Highway in Australia to fuel electric vehicles.
Hello,
So
you
they're
guys.
various stepping stones.
Sorry, there's a
yeah,
thunderstorm here and their internet kind of dropped out for a second.
like for me, I think a lot about industrial mining and like the difficulties of using anything else besides combustion. And it could be done. It's like the same with a lot of people. A lot of people are very hesitant with nuclear. A lot of people fear nuclear deeply, and they don't want to make any progress on that technology. But like the small thorium reactors and smaller nuclear systems, the ability to consume our waste seems so important to me. I mean, we've already made so much damage. It's crazy. So we have to like immediately jump on how do we mitigate that damage? Like billions of dollars spent on kitty litter to put a band-aid on a bullet wound with nuclear mining is to me horrendous. And I think if we advance that technology, it's going to be necessary for anything in space too. So to be
What's
able
the
to
technology you're specifically talking about? Sorry, I jumped in.
Nuclear fusion.
yeah, and mitigation from our prior wastes and fusion and like thorium based salt reactors and to use old spent uranium to get the half-life to go from 10,000 years down to 300 years, which is more manageable. Um, like you could probably like I can only imagine what carbon credits really come down to is exchanging like first world nations nuclear waste and like, oh, you get to hold our nuclear waste for this many years and we'll pay you this much. And
there's a
you
really
know,
big movement now with SMRs, right? Which are the micro generators, the little tiny uranium generators, or they're using
Yes,
some of them.
I heard
does it
about it.
seem to is it oxymoronic to have your eco village powered by nuclear power? Like
Well, I
technically.
don't know. I was anti until I started looking at the SMRs, and I'm not so anti anymore. I can't believe I took a step back on that. We still have an issue of storage, but there's also some new groups coming out with breaking down the last bit of decay, and they can't go off in these small SMRs. Anyway, I think
Uh,
it's an important
and
one to
it's
discuss and
it's
figure out.
like this was something that I wanted to bring up in human systems, and I wanted to ask: is this do we like people are like, oh, should we ever really talk about politics? People don't like politics, but like the politics of actual countries, like the actual geopolitics map. If you get the highest level, non-biased dissertations, not really like involved in like partisan politics, but in just human relations and dynamics between nation states. Like that kind of politics is a little different. Um,
You pull us
would
back
that
into
be in human
values and
systems,
beliefs.
like philosophies and ontologies? Like we've been on a heavy nature track, but what about the Western mind and its intricacies within its own psyche, or any of the other nations? Like,
Well, I'm happy you bring this up because if you look on the board, we have a thing of what are some topics we definitely want to focus on the human systems conversation. So let's add politics on there, right? If you keep scrolling to the right, it's reminding us like next call. All right, your thing isn't working. I'm going to add a thing there for politics. But like
yeah, because
politics. Sure.
and same to the point that Howard was making about all the world's resources is all the world's heritage. Like we have a common related family of living on this spaceship Earth. So I feel like that includes like every culture, every religion, every philosophy, ways of knowing. Um, I just feel like resources go beyond just like the human resources. Or it was like Buckminster Fuller was talking about in Operating Manual for Spaceship Earth. It was the fact that gold couldn't even store the value of all of our production facilities across the globe. After World War II, the amount of facilities to produce outweighed the potential of wealth that we could create outweighed the store of value of gold itself. So like it became a poor gauge of value because we could do the projections of like what kind of horsepower we can apply with no horse, it's a bad analogy.
Okay, so I want to check in. It's 4:37, you guys. This conversation, quite important, right? And so this not only touches on human systems, but also on the economic systems, which is the 2 weeks after human systems. Okay. I think by warming up on the human system piece and what we've already been touching on of like figuring out values, figuring out like this is all going to lead to the rest of the important topics of both how do we interrelate, how do we relate with ourselves, with each other, how do we decide together, governance, and like, again, like it's overly ambitious of us to think that we can even cover the tip of the iceberg on 2 calls for any of these topics. We're doing our best to just put breath into these topics and get our thoughts onto a unified whiteboard that we can later on make our way through and process. So this is the experiment, you guys. I'm grateful for all of this initiative. I'd love to hear some feedback on this call. We deviate every week. We deviate a little bit to try something new out. This week, we focused at the beginning of the call on the values, exercise. Everyone has across the board said how important that is, how important it is to define it and keep it at the top of our minds as we go into the more tangible things. I realized I wish, the call was a little bit longer because I see there's still a lot of links that people could share in all of those Miro board sections. I invite you guys to continue in there. Let's see what solutions together in each of our sector, trying to get a few solutions in a couple of hours to start building an agent and start scraping and cataloging solutions. Yeah. Like there's definitely so many solutions out there. This exercise of these calls has been a hybrid of gathering some of those solutions while also getting to know each other and getting a lot of the storytelling from each of us that shares an experience versus just some product with some solution, right? A Venn diagram where they both overlap is the best case, where we have all of those solutions and then everyone's stories of things they've experienced. We're doing our best in 2 hours a week. It actually makes me feel good that we're not doing enough calls. So there's definitely demand on the other side of this, which is good to hear. I'd love to hear from you guys a little bit. Remember on this board, we have a feedback. I'm going to share my screen again.
I wanted to say, this is kind of like an interactive TV show. Is there going to be another season?
Right. This is what we've discussed a bit already. Like, what does season 2 look like of the Regenerative Neighborhood Framework journey? Potentially, it looks like another round of a very similar where we go through the 5 topics. My thought was maybe on the next round, we go through the framework and we work on implementing the framework to the participants of the call, answering the questions that we develop on this first season of getting a framework that's usable. On season 2, potentially we go through calls that explore each one of the steps of the framework, which again, our current working, I'm going to share my screen here. Our current working thing operates on this concept of spirals, where it goes through one page quick reference. Oh, I did the wrong one. It's here. The 5 spirals are a proof of concept, feasibility validation, capital optimization, construction operation, and then continuous regeneration. Are all of you guys on the web? Like, make sure you go on the web page. I'm going to share this screen. I want you to see that. Have you shared a link to the Google Drive in here? Yes. Okay, so yeah. Yes. Mm-hmm. Hive interactive workspace. Where is it?
The last one. I pushed it yesterday. I don't know where.
Okay, well, it's not here. We'll have to update it.
Yeah, it's not working.
Okay, so we have a link, or actually I've shared it also on the Masterminding Eden group on Tribes, I believe. So I think this is the main bulletin board where we're sharing all the updates. I'm doing my best to also share in the groups, both the Masterminding Eden group and the Regen Tribe group, where we're sharing updates of the framework calls. But here you can see this is the resource Dr. Brian shared. And in here, I'm going to share. Oh, okay. Okay, great. So I'm uploading, I'm like seeing, if you guys go to the Regenerative Neighborhood Framework call website, at the bottom of this, under join our group on Telegram, let me see, oh, there it is. Access the promo materials. You can access the drive. And on this drive, you can see the Build-a-thon resource library and the design flyers. So the flyers are if you want to invite anyone. And here in the Build-a-thon resources, you can see also the LLM process. So this is all of the stuff we've processed so far with the LLM. This one is the one Dr. Brian did, the high-level summary of the whole Miro board from the first 4 weeks of calls. And then in here, these top three are the ones that I'm showing off right now, which is the most up-to-date example of a usable framework that the LLM has processed using all of the resources we've shared and all of the documentation we've put together. It's all there. If any of you have questions, feel free to message us on the groups. I know we're like way over the time, and I want to honor everyone's like hard stop time. If you have to drop, I totally understand. I'm going to stay for a few minutes to gauge any questions, any feedback. I'd love to hear from all of you if anyone has anything to say. Link here quickly to that framework. Yes. Let me drop the link here to the framework. Here's the link to the Google Drive. Here's the link to the Google Drive with framework resources. Yeah, and remember, all of that stuff is on the landing page that Sonia most beautifully put together. This landing page, I'm sharing the link now. Landing page with all links. Has the links to all the meetings, to the Google Calendar, so you can add to your Google Calendar, to all of the videos and all of the transcripts. And as I'm processing raw data, you'll be able to see the exports of the PDFs as vector files in that Google Drive that you have access to from the webpage. So you have one place to see it all. I'd love to hear from you guys if anyone has any final thoughts, any feedback. Again, we're recording this log of the conversations with everybody, and all of that we're also extracting and feeding to this LLM processing journey. I'm like excited by that journey. So all of your feedback is super valuable.
Hey, Oscar. Yeah, you may have referenced this in that last commentary there, but what is your iteration cycle in terms of updating the LLM report that Dr. Brian had prepared based on what was on the Miro board when he did it? What's your iteration cycle of updating it as we have each one of these sessions? Are you doing it after every session to update it to so that we continue that use?
So that high level one, Dr. Brian pulled when we had only finished the 2 ecology calls, I believe.
Right.
Or maybe just one of the, I think both of the ecology calls. So that was like the high level view just to test and flex how his abacus did with a big PDF and pulled it. Right. My process has been a little more broken down, where that first week we kind of just described our goals with the LLMs and everyone onboarded. Last week on the LLM call, we started processing just the first 3 Miro board calls worth of content. We haven't even started on the categories yet. I just took the high level goal of what we're doing to have the LLM help us create the skeleton for the framework. I have a working skeleton now. My thought is on this next week's Thursday is to say, okay, with that skeleton in mind, here are resources we have for ecology from weeks 4 or 5 and 6 or 4 and 5, whatever it was. And how can we integrate these resources into the framework with more details on ecology? And also doing that for hardware. This is kind of something I'm not really sure about that I'll be experimenting with. I think potentially what we could do is do another round of that high level review that Dr. Brian did with now all of the slides up to week 6 and see what it regurgitates and what it like synthesizes and sends us. I think that could be maybe the next step in like the high level analysis, and also going through it in like a step-by-step process of analyzing section by section, doing little modules, and then merging all of that together. I find that with that extra little bit of breakdown, I get much better results from LLM processing when I cluster the tasks into different steps and do that, and then merge all of those things together. Demand software. Yeah, right. Yeah, I like that more context. Yeah, I'm receiving your messages here. So you guys, any feedback from you guys? I'd love to hear. New participants, Rick, Alejandra, Theodora, I'm happy you're coming back to the calls. It's nice to see you. I'd love to hear perspectives from you guys. Leo, welcome. I'd love to hear from you as well.
Hi, thank you. Yeah, sorry, I'm a bit sick, so I don't have a lot of energy now, but I'm really happy to meet you all, and thanks to Leo who invited me to the call. So yeah, this is great. I will take the proper time to explore the materials also in the Telegram and try to contribute with information that might be also interesting for you to nurture this.
Nice. I just shared a link to Tribe's platform on the chat. Also, make an account in there. This is like where everyone's profile is. We're getting to know each other, and join the Masterminding Eden group. That way we can all, follow each other, see each other, and share more.
Yeah, hey, Oscar, Vitaly put in the chat an interesting link on presets for the scheduled iteration schedule. So just take a look at it. I clicked on it and I saw it on my side, and it might be useful. I think it's going to be
scheduled iteration.
Yeah. So like as you are adding to the body of knowledge that the LLM is processing, this would seem to be, some functionality to make that as efficient as possible to build it.
Okay.
So
nice.
if you check into that, because I think that's what Vitaly is intending there, because that was a part of the conversation we were just having, and then he just dropped that in there.
Cool. Yeah, let me save that. I'm going to add this to our framework processing section. And just I would like to share this as well as you guys are sharing. On the Miro board, right? So we have like on the left side here, we have the theoretical calls where we're going over the categories. And here on the right, we're starting to do the journey of like each call for the LLM. Maybe this is our most active log of what we're doing and how we're processing stuff. So let me share this link here. That's great. Miss Ralph Orchestrator. Cool. And I think that'll kind of like, I'm just going to post this here for now. Preparing for call 3. Okay, yeah, I'd love feedback from everyone else that's on the call today. Please feel free to share anything.
Yeah, I'll speak up real quick. I just wanted to thank you guys here. This is so needed. Getting like-minded people together and actually putting together resources in a structured way has been something that I think a lot of us have been dreaming about. So thank you for inviting all of us here, and thanks for facilitating this, and specifically thanks for having me. It's been really a pleasure. I'm looking forward to contributing any way I can.
Cool. Yeah. I think your contributions would be super lovely. So Thursdays at 3 p.m. we host the calls for specifically processing the stuff with the LLM, all this data. If you're open for Thursday, it'd be nice for you to join and share some input. Maybe your agents can work some magic in here. Maybe you have like an idea for processing this in a way that we haven't thought of yet. That would be lovely, lovely. If not, maybe you can share, feel free to message me or share whatever you'd like. If you're on the Tribes platform, make an account in there and share in the Masterminding Eden group. Suggestions on how we can process it, like this link Vitaly just sent. It's a great one. I'm going to add it also to the group. Yeah, I'm doing my best to keep track of all of this wealth of knowledge and log it in the right place so that later on we can do it and like make use of it. It's like more content is more challenging, but also very exciting. Tool to log. Cool. Okay, so yeah, as an example here, I'm just posting this link that Vitaly sent to log LLM processing journey. I'm going to share that here to the group. Great. I don't know what's going on. It's not working. Okay, my internet's a little spotty right now, but okay, yeah. Does anyone have any closing thoughts as we wrap up the call?
I wanted to just show my appreciation real quick for you, Oscar, for hosting this event yet again. This has been the highlight of my weeks, sincerely. I feel like I have so much more to learn from you guys. I'm really happy to be here. I even had a short talk with Kevin and Dr. Brian about circular economies, and I'm really excited to learn more about that. So yeah, I think everybody here has really unique perspective about how we can contribute to this larger vision. And I'm really hopeful after seeing, I'm yet to check out all these links, but after just skimming through a few, I already see so much potential actually. Wow, like we actually might have a chance.
Yeah. Definitely. We have more than a chance. We have all the solutions. It's just getting organized and getting all their knowledge somewhere and putting it, step by step into more real and bigger and bigger.
Yeah.
This is why we're all here, right? Long term, you guys, we're all part of these calls. Again, like we saw on the description, it was a good question that you asked, Rick, about our purpose and why we're gathering. And I'm honing in on this specific summary that Chimera gave in the big run, and then the short version of that, and then the options that you gave, Rick, which is create a regenerative society. We need a prototype. So let's create a framework so that we can then create.
I'd like to just read them out. Can I read them out?
Yeah, which ones?
Option A, a clean and decision-ready masterminding Eden exists to help multidisciplinary builders and communities move from fragmented extractive settlement models and good idea chaos to a tested open source blueprint for regenerative, self-sustaining, disaster-resilient habitats. By convening collective intelligence through on-site masterminds, simulation and gamified iteration, and a real-world pilot deployments, so human settlements can reliably regenerate ecosystems, strengthen social coherence, and maintain viable for future generations.
Yep.
It's a nice. Your agent summarized it really nicely. And a new Earth, option B. Signal still operational. Masterminding even exists to help steward humanity's builders, stewards, and innovators from old operating systems, control, extraction, fragility, template by designing, simulating, and stress testing regenerative settlement systems in collaborative mastermind and persistent game-based design engine. So communities worldwide can self-organize with integrity, thrive through disruption, and leave the earth more alive than they found it. These are nice. What governing
A the most so far.
And C, most minimal, high clarity, low poetry. Mastermind Eating exists to co-design, simulate, and pilot open source regenerative settlement model that enables communities to be self-sufficient in food, energy, water, and waste while remaining socially coherent under crisis, so regenerative neighborhoods can replicate globally without collapsing into burnout, power struggles, or extraction.
Yeah, that's a TLDR. I like that one the most.
Yeah,
nice.
And I really do enjoy these. This is we're working with a whole wave of people, so.
Yeah, my dream is that all of us at some point will collaborate on a project, whether it's through thought, through time spent there, through connecting others that want to be a part of it, or actually investing and wanting to live there. And we all get to spend physical time together. Part of this roadmap originally had an in-person gathering scheduled for April. This turned out to need a little bit of like change of time. So the April Masterminding Eden gathering won't be happening. It's being postponed, where it was aimed to be a 150 person gathering, a huge community, almost like a pop-up city, living together and continuing this process of this framework and stress testing it. It's looking like it's going to be more a series of small gatherings. We might do one here in Colombia, in this community where we're living right now, this resort or actual hostel hotel space, where anyone on the call is going to have like priority invitation to come and join and be here and contribute in an in-person experience where maybe we test some of the human systems, how we're living together, and see how we can apply some of these physical systems to this location and other locations that we scout to do these gatherings at. All right, guys, Leo, would you like to share anything?
Thank you for this call. I also agree that it's really helpful to bring together solutions and to list them, and I think this is really valuable. I also think that that Kalia had a few good comments in the chat around the it's a big topic, right? Building a regenerative neighborhood, but building a regenerative village, and there can be many different ways of approaching that topic. So I do think maybe it's interesting to have focused calls on one approach. I mean, this is great, but and like collecting solutions is phenomenal and is super important. And at the same time, maybe there's also a space that's needed for people who are in different stages of working on building a neighborhood, or like a practical exchange, or like to have like more specific scoped time for exchange, or different calls. Yeah, I hope that made sense. But yeah, overall, really good. It's just maybe a lot in a bit of time, and a lot of different
Yeah.
and ideas and potential ways of looking at it. And also, I agree with Kamara's point as well, that it's easier to concentrate for a bit of time to work on the mirror if there's silence.
Yep. I agree with that as well. Yep. Yeah, I think, like in the best case scenario, every week there could be a call for each one of the categories. Like someone that goes, oh, I am so passionate about human systems, and I'm going to hold a human systems call every Tuesday at 3 p.m. And then someone's very passionate about hardware, and they're going to hold a call about hardware systems every Thursday at 4 p.m. or 3 p.m., whatever, And this becomes a regular cadence. My hope is probably over time we could figure something like that out. Right now, we just wanted to do an introduction, get some general content out there. If I think Phil has volunteered to host a human systems call, potentially not on Saturday, but on one of the days of next week or the following. I'm going to update everyone on when that could be, because it's going to be great to have other community members also leading calls that they're passionate about, and gathering resources, having space for others to share their feelings and their experiences on, because this is how we learn. And then I think the most exciting part for me is now we can record these calls, upload these transcripts to an LLM, and make the most of all of this content that gets shared. I always found it a shame that so many awesome stories were shared during calls, and then that Zoom goes away and all of that gets lost in like metaverse. Now we can actually do something with all of that knowledge that's being shared. So yeah, Leo, I totally agree with you on that. Yeah, thank you for that feedback. Okay, you guys. Well, yeah, good to see you, Kevin. Everyone, again, I think like last week's homework, I invite you all to have a one-on-one call with someone in the group. coordinate something with someone that you can have a chat with that's important to you and them, and let's build these bonds. Because yes, we're talking about physical locations and how we create them and they work, but all of that is dependent on our interpersonal connections. We are the community, and this is our first iteration at that. We're all meeting each other virtually, which is beautiful, and one-on-ones help develop that beyond just a little breakout group that we have time for on a call. Yeah, go ahead, Rick.
So I had one question I wanted to ask at the beginning, but I wasn't quite sure if there was time or space for it. I'm completely new here.
Sure.
So when it comes to wanting to build better systems to build this amazing regenerative neighborhood, I want to follow up with what Leo was saying, is that there's different versions of this thing, this neighborhood, so forth. For instance, like if you follow like Dunbar's number, right? Dunbar says, hey, there's a cap of 150 people that you should live around. If you live around more than that, it's just not going to work from a human perspective, from a feminine human perspective, and balanced masculine. It just won't work, right? So in my mind, like when I think about building a new earth and I'm thinking about communities, I'm thinking about a worldwide tribe where all these cities get absorbed, and we lift all of all of the things from the soil and let the soil heal again, and so, and there's other people who are like, have regenerative ideas for 15-minute smart cities, so I was wondering what the context of this group particularly was, in that for me, I want to make sure I'm aligning more towards what seems natural and normal from a living system. Like, from when I think of a tribe, I think of 150 people or less that are intermixing and traveling through, just like our ancestors did. Our ancestors were very nomadic. And I love what's happening here. You guys are working on a lot of things we're working on here in Costa Rica, and having a framework where our contributions can follow us, in systems where you don't have to sacrifice yourself to belong, and so yeah, I just was kind of curious in terms of the scope of that. Like when it comes to building a system for a tribe of 150 or less versus a city copy, there's a big divergence there. And that's kind of what I was working on with the purpose statement, is where in that purpose statement does that answer lie?
Yeah, it's a good question. There's like, I think this terminology of saying framework over blueprint has, I think, guided my thought on this, because we're not saying that the topics we're not giving people a blueprint with this work. We're bringing up topics that need to be considered. For example, if you are on a 100-hectare piece of land in the middle of nowhere, rural, you'll be able, for food sovereignty, to grow your own food, or have a few neighbors that you organize with to make all the food you need. Versus, right, the framework leads you to ask the question of food sovereignty and food production. In a more urban scape, food sovereignty looks more like having a network of local farmers that you have direct connection with, without counting on a middleman that is like the food, where all the farmers go and then they distribute. So it's taking this variation of urban, suburban, and rural into mind, because a regenerative neighborhood can exist in all three of those contexts. From the cityscape, where even one building of residents can host a Friday night dinner and do a little gathering in the park across the street once a month, and build the sense of community, have a little food garden on the roof, and have a list of local farmers that they buy from, and maybe they do a collective buy for the building. So that's a community within an urban scape. Same as in a suburban scape, maybe a block of people all connect or whatever it is, and then a standalone eco-village out in the rural setting. The bell curve of humans live in a city. So it's critical that we also focus this work on providing solutions for where 80 to 90% of humanity lives, the urban scape, for sure. I think the approach for me has been like, it's hard to fight a monolith. So it's hard to change people's idea in an urban scape to adopt these things until they see that it works. And the easiest way to build a prototype is from scratch, somewhere where you can implement these things and it works. My concept has always been show people that it works in a small scale and then apply that to the urban scape. on our track with Regen Tribe and our collective, we've been gathering the resources for people building prototypes more in the rural space, but we have a deep desire. We spend our summers in Berlin. We have a deep desire to create an urban guide for applying regenerative neighborhood practices, values, and all of the above. It would be lovely to have locations that feel the same when you're in the city as when you're out in the mountains or out in the savannah. It's a good question, Rick.
No, that makes sense, and it's really important, the blueprint versus framework thing too, because we realize like there's no such thing as a solution for everybody, because everybody has different common, it's common life preferences and common life goals, and if you have those two things, you're going to want to live in a village or a city or this thing, so this is very much in line with what we're trying to bring forward too, is that what are the frameworks? How do we collect the frameworks for all of these different things? Starting with, the fact that like a circle of 150 people can really live in any of those environments. And that's that little minimal viable path that you're talking about. How do we make that little, no matter where it is, which thing do we plug in to make that happen? So that's what I love about this. This is great. Thank you.
Cool. It's a good question. You ask really good questions, Rick. Yeah, I see that you're deep in the Costa Rica. I'd love to have a one-on-one with you this week.
Absolutely.
And find out what you're doing. I visited this link. It's not loading for me. The joiniwasready.com.
Oh, join.iwasready.com. Maybe I didn't copy it. Let me see here.
Yeah. Maybe it's an HTTP, but okay, cool. So does anyone have any closing remarks? I shared a Telegram group in this in here just now. I'd love if you guys aren't in there, jump into that Telegram group. Rick, Alejandra, Tidora, I think you're in there already. Leo, if you're not in there yet, we'll be sharing updates, links. We can coordinate one-on-ones through in there if you guys are up for it. Make your profile on Tribe's platform and join the Masterminding group. I'm just trying to figure out how to stay in touch with everyone as effectively as possible. I wish there was just one channel, but I know we all live in many metaverses, so we're doing our best to stay tethered. Thank you guys for joining. Thursday, we'll be doing the call at 3 p.m. We'll do our next set of LLM processing. Feel free to check out that framework that I shared in the link. I'm excited about it. I'm going to keep working on it this week. And we'll be integrating, Thomas, that's here on the call. He has an awesome concept that he's been diligently working on called potentialism. It's the evolution of the best parts of capitalism mixed with the best parts of more equitable governance and prioritizing value metrics by usefulness over just general price setting. Will be, now that we have a general framework, integrating different practices and theories to see how that works out. So stay tuned for that. We'll be sharing updates on the Miro board. Feel free to write whenever, you guys. We're here for it. Grateful for you guys and happy to hold any questions or one-on-ones that you guys are up for.
All right.
Happy weekend. Enjoy your weekend, guys. Bye.
Bye.